Hey, Internet! It's Matt here for the Dork Lords with trusty sidekick, Kittalore. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We do all things dorkly here, whether it be sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes. We've probably got a playlist about it, so enjoy. Today, we are doing our Dork Lord of the Rings segment with another Lord of the Rings topic. Today is a doozy. It is known as the Disaster of Gladden Fields. And if you've read the books or you've seen the movies, you've got some idea of what happened at this particular incredibly important moment in Tolkien's history. But I'll bet you don't know the whole thing. I didn't. Did a little research as I was doing this, and I thought, whoa, it kind of completely changed my view of Isildur, in fact, who originally cut the ring off of Sauron's hand. All right, so here we go. Let's start with what you probably know out there in YouTube land. Okay, if you remember in the movies, they did a little montage, and they showed how Isildur, after cutting the ring off of Sauron's hand, he took it. Elrond's like, throw it into the fire, destroy it. And he's like, no, I'm keeping it, because the ring had kind of corrupted him, so he's like, I can't let this go. So he keeps it, and then later on, he and his men going through the forest, the orcs come, shoot him, he falls in the water, drops the ring. The ring is then found like thousands of years later by Gollum, well, what turns into Smeagol, who turns into Gollum. So that's kind of what most people know about it. There is a lot more to this story. So, okay, let me start with a little backstory first. Okay, Isildur. He's got 4 sons at the time of the Battle of the Last Alliance. Okay, that's where he cuts the ring off of Sauron's hand. All right. 3 of the sons are old enough for military action, and so they are part of this War of the Last Alliance. 2, the younger, kind of the middle 2 brothers, Cirion and Eretan, he sends to guard Minas Ithil. It's the tower that later on becomes Minas Morgul, but at the time, it's still a watchtower, and it's just to make sure that Sauron doesn't retreat when the big battle comes, the Battle of Dagorlad and the Battle of the Last Alliance. So they're not actually at that final battle where the ring gets cut off. The oldest son, Isildur's oldest son, Elendur, is there. So he's at the battle. He's with his dad. Of course, Isildur's with his dad, Elendil, who gets killed in the battle. There is one other son. So I mentioned there were 4 sons. 3 of them were kind of a military action. The 4th one was a kid. And so he wasn't involved in the battle at all. And his name was Valendil. And to keep him safe, Isildur kept his wife and his son Valendil at Rivendell. So he's hanging out back at Rivendell just to keep him away from this war. Okay, I say all that. It's going to come. It's important later. Okay. Some other things that are important. After Elendil dies, obviously Isildur is king. He is king of Gondor and Arnor, the two realms. He wears the Star of Elendil as his crown. It's a gem. It's a jewel that they had back in the days of Numenor. And so instead of a crown, it's a jewel that's kind of like set on his brow. And in fact, the glow of that jewel apparently is... orcs are afraid of it, probably for what it signifies. Like, it means there's a Numenorian around who's probably going to kick our axe, so let's get that guy out of here. But that's what he wore as his crown. He also tended to wear the ring around his neck on a gold chain. And it's interesting, he actually confides, Elendur, his oldest son, he confides a lot to Elendur. And one of the things he confides to him is, I can't use the ring. Like, it pains me to use it. Like, touching it causes me pain. And I also realize that I do not have enough will to bend this ring to my will. So he knows all this. He's actually aware of the ring and its influence. He knows he can't bring himself to destroy it, but he also can't use it, and he realizes he doesn't have a strong enough will to wield the ring. And he confides that information to his eldest son. Other things he also confides to his son, things that he knows and Elendur knows, are about the 3 elven ring bearers. I did a video on the Elven Rings. You can check that out if you want more information. But basically, at this time, Gandalf's hasn't arrived yet to Middle-earth. So that ring that he eventually wields is in the possession of the elf Círdan. And so those rings are actually, while they're very secret to everyone else, Isildur knows that Elrond's got a ring, Galadriel's got a ring, Círdan's got a ring. And his son, Elendor, also knows this fact. Okay, so the war's over. Yay, good guys won. Isildur spends about a year back in Gondor, just getting all the affairs in order, making sure the realm is kind of back on track. So he spends about a year ruling, basically, more or less. He intends to rule longer than that, but this disaster of Gladden Fields comes up and kind of cuts that short. Okay, but he spends a year before he goes back home. And so this is about a year to 2 years after the Battle of the Last Alliance has happened. He takes a group of knights, Dunedain. The accounts say that there's 200 Dunedain knights and maybe 20 archers. And he's going to return to Rivendell. Now, part of that reason, see his wife and his kid, Valandil, who had been safely kept away in Rivendell. But here's the part that this is maybe the most shocking revelation that I didn't know until I really looked this up. He had another reason for going to Rivendell. And that reason was he was going to give the ring to Elrond, to the keepers of the three rings. Basically let them decide what to do with it. I would say they would have decided, destroy it! Since that was Elrond's directive to him. He couldn't destroy it himself. But after a year of holding onto this ring and keeping it around his neck, he had decided, it's time. I need to let this thing go. And so this trip that he's on, the one where he's attacked by orcs, if he had made it all the way to Rivendell, which he was only a few days away, he would have given the ring up to let the elven ring bearers decide what to do with the ring. And he lets his son, again, know that as well. Like, I've got the one ring. Don't tell anybody. So, no one else really knew. But Elendor knew, I've got the ring. I can't use it. And I need to give this ring away. And I'm going to give it to Elrond at Rivendell. Okay, so they set out. For whatever reason, they don't feel like there's any real reason to worry on this trip. It's after the war. They feel like there's no real threat hanging out. But they were wrong about that. Now, just to give you an idea of Gladden Fields, I'll put up a map. But to give you an idea, you've got, let's see, as you guys are looking, you've got Rivendell, bink. Then you've got like a long line of the Misty Mountains. And then just on the other side of the mountains is Gladden Fields. Okay, there's a river, the Gladden River. It joins up with the big Anduin River. And where it meets up with the Anduin River, there's a big marsh, and it's called Gladden Fields. None of the groups we track, like say in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, go through this area. In The Hobbit, when Bilbo and the dwarves leave Rivendell and they go through the Misty Mountains, they go just north of Gladden Fields, so they just miss it to the north. When it comes to Lord of the Rings, when Frodo and the Fellowship of the Ring go through Moria and cross through the Misty Mountains, they cross to the south of Gladden Fields. So Gladden Fields is right between the stories of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. No one goes there in those stories. But in this situation, on his way to Rivendell, he's going to cross through the Misty Mountains. Isildur hits this area, these marshlands. Notably, he's not just there by himself. He's there with the 3 military sons. So Elendor is there, Círdan is there, Eretan is there. All 4 of that line of Isildur dies in this moment. So that leaves the only son, is Valandil, back in Rivendell. As it turns out, he becomes an excellent king, rules for a couple hundred years. But Yeah, almost the entire line of Isildur is wiped out in this one campaign, one battle. The orcs, what we get, the idea is that these orcs were sent originally years earlier to thwart the last alliance from getting to Mordor. But they realized as they were hanging out in the forest trying to keep, say, Gil-galad or any of those folks from crossing, that those armies were way too big. And so they basically hung out waiting for smaller groups to attack. The war ends. There's a year later. They still don't realize the war's over. And so they're still hanging out in the forest hunting down, prey, basically, smaller groups of humans or elves. It seems a little odd that no one would have known that because this group is huge. Like, it's at least 2,000 orcs. It's 10 times the size of Isildur's group, which is about 200. So somehow that group, these orcs made their way through the Gladden Fields area unknowns to people for about a year. Tolkien does say that apart from the fact that there was just happened to be this orc party out there, the ring itself was calling to these orcs, bringing them in. They didn't know that there was a ring bringing them. They didn't know that that's the ring. But the ring, basically, its power called the orcs to it. And that is essentially how this raid happened. The ring, I guess, sensed it was going to be, I'm going to get destroyed if you keep getting me all the way to Rivendell, so attack! And so the orcs came in great numbers. And, the Dunedain, Isildur's group, I guess the idea was like they basically took out over 1,000 orcs in a series of attacks. But as night fell, day turned to night, the orcs now didn't have that problem of daylight bothering them, and so they could attack with more ferocity, and the numbers of the knights started to dwindle. Now, a couple of things happen here that are pretty interesting. One, Isildur, early on in this skirmish, realizes, that's a whole bunch of orcs. I'm in trouble. So he sends one of his men, he calls him Otar, but Otar is actually just a word for soldier, so we don't really know this guy's actual name, but he called him by the name Otar. He gives him the shards of Narsil. He had them in his hand. So Narsil is the sword that cut the ring. Eventually, Aragorn reforges that sword. That sword Isildur had with him. He was taking it to Rivendell with him. And he sends Otar and another emissary. Otar was his squire, basically. So his squire, he hands him these pieces of the sword, not two, but whatever. These pieces of Narsil, says, take these to Rivendell. Go. Don't stay here. Get these to safety. He doesn't give him the ring, obviously. He's like, that's a little too important for you to take. I'll hold on to this. You go with Narsil. So Otar, we'll call him Otar. We're not sure of his name. And one other guy go to Rivendell with the sword. Only 3 people total survive this fight. 3 of Isildur's retinue. The other one is Elendur's squire. So Isildur's son's squire gets knocked out, is found underneath Elendur, but he's alive and he can recount what happened in these last moments. So kind of the story comes through this guy who was Elendur's squire. As it turns out, Otar did deliver the Narsil. He also aided in contacting Thranduil up in Mirkwood, and Thranduil came down and basically any orcs that were left were decimated at that point. But that's after the fact. So, the fight is going very poorly at this point. It's night. They're dropping like flies. Shield walls going down. Elendur turns to his dad, and there's a very touching scene that Tolkien writes. I believe it's in the Silmarillion. I'll just read a little quick passage from this. But this is Elendur talking to his dad as the orcs are coming. And when Isildur talks about the keepers, what he's saying is the keepers of the Elven Rings. So he's talking about, basically, when he says the keepers, he's talking about Elrond, more or less, because he's talking about the closest keeper in Rivendell. So this is how it goes. "My king," said Isildur, "Cirion is dead, and Eretan is dying. Your last counselor must advise, nay, command you, as you commanded Otar, go. Take your burden, and at all costs bring it to the keepers, even at the cost of abandoning your men and me." "King's son," said Isildur, "I knew that I must do so, but I feared the pain. Nor could I go without your leave. Forgive me and my pride that has brought you to this doom." Isildur kissed him. Go now," he said. So just a touching scene there where Isildur is basically saying, you need to get this ring back to Elrond, even if it means sacrificing me. Use the ring, get out of here, go. Isildur's like, I know what I had to do, but I can't do it. I can't leave you to die, and it's my pride, my shortcomings have led us to this moment where I see 3 of my children killed basically in front of me. But Isildur takes this opportunity. He puts the ring on. Interestingly, the gem in his head, the Star of Elendil, his crown, didn't go invisible. So it keeps glowing even when he's invisible. It kind of scares the orcs a bit for a second. They're afraid. They see this thing shining with no corporeal form around it. He eventually hides the light from the gem under his cloak, and he takes off for the river. He gets to the Anduin River. He has to cross it, and he's got to take off his armor. So he takes off his armor. It's a tough crossing, and in the middle of crossing the river through all the reeds and rushes, he loses the ring. The ring falls from his hand, so he is no longer invisible. When he finally crosses to the other side, now he's got no armor on, and he's visible, and he's exhausted. There are orcs patrolling the other shore, and they shoot him. And he falls back into the river, and the orcs basically let him go, or the river carries him too fast, and he's gone. And I put a little caveat, put a stick a pin in this, but he is never seen again. But there is more to that story. But he is never seen again. Just a terrible tragedy. And Isildur is killed. And it's, as I say, only 3 people survived that actual fight. One thing I should point out that's a difference between the movies and the books is that, in the movies, Elrond brings the reforged Sword of Narsil to Aragorn. But in the books, Elrond gives Aragorn, it's essentially his inheritance. He gives him his inheritance when Aragorn is 20, I think. Now, he's 87 years old at the time of the War of the Ring. So, for 67 years before the time of the Lord of the Rings, the books, Aragorn is carrying the pieces of Narsil around with him. It's his heritage. And it's just something it's a burden he carries. And so it's his, anyway. So the fact that, I think it's kind of interesting that Aragorn carries this broken sword around with him all that time. And then he reforges it when he's back in Rivendell in the books. But kind of interesting little side note. Okay, so things we've learned there. I mean, pretty amazing that Isildur wanted to basically destroy the ring. He was going to give it up so it could be destroyed. Didn't want to use it, felt like he did not have the ability to use it, confided that information to his son, who was also killed. If you think he had just gotten a little bit farther, could have, saved a lot of people, a lot of dying, but also gotten rid of a really cool story. So the other cool tidbit to this story is, I mentioned, no one ever found his body. Okay. A lot of people... not a whole lot of people knew that the ring had been lost at the Gladden Fields, but some people did. And a couple of thousand years later, when Saruman calls the White Council, he's particularly interested in the whereabouts of that ring, and he sends a bunch of spies in that area to start just scouring for the ring. Obviously, he did not find it. But, interestingly enough, after the War of the Ring, Aragorn's king, he's starting to put the Orthanc, the tower, Saruman's tower, Isengard, back into circulation. So he brings the Palantir back, and he cleans out the tower. He's going to use it as a watchtower, like it always was prior to Saruman being given that tower. In the act of cleaning it out, he finds a secret door that is behind this big metal cabinet, closet. With the help of Gimli, I think Gimli is the one who pries the door open. They get inside, and they find all of these trinkets that kind of, artifacts that Saruman had collected over the years. Two of them very important, very relevant, because two of the things that are in this secret door behind this metal closet in Orthanc were, one, the chain, the gold chain that Isildur kept the ring on, and the Star of Elendil, the crown that Isildur had on when he died. These are two things that almost certainly would have been on his corpse. So, actually, as it turns out, Aragorn takes that Star of Elendil and he uses it for special occasions and affairs of state thereafter. So it gets kind of put back into circulation by one of Isildur's heirs. But what it means is Saruman found Isildur, disposed of the body, got rid of the bones, kept the magic items or kept the cool items that he found he looted the corpse basically, and then put them away in the secret room. Obviously, if Isildur had still had the ring on him, Saruman would have found it all those years ago and would have probably done terrible things with it. But it fell into, obviously, the Anduin, where it was found by Daigle, Smeagol's brother, who I guess for a few minutes was actually a ring bearer. You could call him one of the ring bearers before Smeagol/Gollum killed him and took it. But there you go. The disaster of Gladden Fields. I thought it was really fascinating. There's a lot to take in there with the little fine details of that battle. Again, it's Tolkien at his best, just really creating this rich tapestry in a world where you can enjoy it just on the surface, on the highlights of the story, or you can really enjoy these really intricate details that all tie together and add to the history. So, thank you very much, everybody. Subscribe if you want to get more fun Lord of the Rings content. We're going to be talking Daredevil. We're going to be more Star Wars. So come on back. Thank you, Kittilor. Kittilor, very helpful for this. Don't get up. All right. Bye, everybody.